Hey everyone, it's Tom TJ Abbott here from AMC NPO Solutions, coming to you live right now from Merrit, British Columbia. So I'm going to share with you right now what to do before, during, and after a strategic planning session. So first, before the session starts, what I encourage you to do is you've obviously got to get all of the key stakeholders involved. So who needs to be at this meeting? So make sure you get the entire board there. If you've got some volunteers on some committees that you think would be useful to be there as well, be sure to include them. Be sure to include some key staff members, especially your executive director. And if you have some senior managers whose input would be useful, be sure to include them in the strategic planning session as well. A word of caution, though, you don't want to have too many people in the room. Now, people will say that, of course, the more people you have, the more ideas you'll have. And that's true. The more people you have, the more ideas you'll have. So what that means is there'll be a lot more discussion. So typically for every person you add to a meeting, you add about 30 minutes to an hour of discussion. So think about that when you're planning your next session. So you want to limit it to, let's say anywhere between 8 to 15 people, I think is a really nice, manageable size. So first of all, decide who needs to be there and then be sure that they can all make it. The second tip that I want to offer you is get them working in advance. So before the planning session, be sure you send them some questions that they can start working on right away. So I'm going to share with you right now 3 sample questions that you can ask. And these are 3 questions that I asked this particular board at Choix CIM Children and Family Services Society. So question number 1 that you want to ask your board is this: why is this the right time for a planning session? So be sure you ask them, why is this a good time for this planning session? What's going on right now that makes having this session important or critical? Is there just something in the air? Is there an energy? Is it a new board? Do you have a new president? Have you just hired a new executive director? Is there a change in government, either at the federal or the provincial level? What's happening right now that makes this strategic planning session important? And you want to hear from everybody on the board. So you want to find out what everybody thinks. So that will give you some insights into where they're coming from. The second question you want to ask the board in advance is, what do you hope to accomplish during this session? What do you hope to accomplish during this session? So that's a really important question to really try to get a sense for what does everybody want to get out of the session and manage expectations. So for example, you might have some people coming to the session wanting to just come up with clarity on direction. You may have others that come to the planning session with a specific agenda topic. So they want to embark on a new initiative, or they want to talk about new programs or policies specifically. So it would be really useful to the facilitator and for everybody involved to have a sense in advance, what are some of the big picture ideas that we're going to talk about? So number 1 is, why is this a good time for this planning session? Number 2, what do you hope to achieve or accomplish during the session? Question number 3 that you want to ask the board in advance is, how will you know this session was successful? How will you know that this session wasn't a complete waste of your time? How will you know that there was value in the planning session? So you might find some overlap in answers between question number 2 and question number 3, or you might find something completely different. So with this group that I worked with the last 2 days, overwhelmingly they felt that they knew that the session would be successful if they left with clear action items and goals that they could start working on tomorrow. That was so important for them, to not just come up with these pie-in-the-sky ideas that just sit there and never get touched. So they wanted to leave clearly with tangible goals and action items that they could start working on tomorrow. So that was really awesome, and that was an objective that I wrote on the flip chart and just kept it in the front of the room for all to see for the 2 days. So there would be no doubt about what we're working towards and how we will define success at the end of the session. So those were some tips on what to do before the planning session. So now I'm going to share with you what you need to do during the planning session. So during the session, it's important to, in my opinion, kind of set the context for the session and really get everybody up to speed on who we are as an organization. So what we did yesterday, first thing, was we pulled out the old vision statement. So we went through the bylaws and the Constitution and revisited the vision statement. For some of the directors, it was the first time they had seen the vision statement. So that is surprising to some and not surprising to others. So the first thing you want to do is go through the vision statement and make sure that, number one, everybody understands the vision. Number two, make sure everybody agrees with the vision. And as it turned out yesterday, not everybody agreed on the vision. They did in principle, big picture, but there were some specific words that they felt were either redundant, unnecessary, or incorrect. So we spent some time tweaking, modifying, and improving the vision statement. And man, the room was excited. They were pumped. It was the first time they had gone through this exercise. And in fact, one of the directors said, we need to do this every year. So I don't know if we have to do it every year, but every 2 to 3 years, sure. Maybe every year, but I'm not sure. That's a bit ambitious. But definitely, the spirit was, we need to revisit this and make sure that we're all on the same page and moving in the same direction and the right direction. So we went through the vision statement and came up with something that everybody believed in. That set the tone. Here's a little tip about vision. A lot of people get vision and mission confused. The vision statement, a vision by definition, is your view or image of the future. So it's not what's happening right now. It's not your goals that you need to achieve today or even tomorrow. It's really your dreams, your image of the future, almost like a perfect world. So in the not-for-profit sector, what we're talking about is when your job is done, when you've achieved all of your goals, what will the world be like? What will your members say? What will your constituents say? What will your stakeholders say and do and live? What will it be like? So that's kind of a vision statement. So they came up with a great one. So once we finalize that, then you move on to the mission statement. Now the mission statement is a bit different. So if the vision is sort of the vision or the image of the future, the mission is more what you need to be doing day to day. What do you need to be working on? What drives you? What are some of these objectives on more of a day-to-day basis? So they're still somewhat aspirational, but they're a bit closer to home than your vision. So Choix CIM, they had a really great acronym that was CARE, C-A-R-E. So I took great care to make sure that we didn't mess with the acronym, but still were able to tweak the verbiage, to tweak some of the words, the language within that. And we did that. And just a few minor adjustments, and then we had ourselves a great mission statement. So once you're armed with the... Oh.
It's getting a little windy and they'll start blowing away.
Oh, but then I'm going to be fully exposed in sun.
Oh no!
Yeah, it's a bit...
I don't have any sunscreen, sorry.
Yeah, can you... It's not windy. Can we maybe put it up and then I'll take it down if it gets windy?
No, because they start getting windy and then they start, like, if it hits a car or anything, we're liable.
Got
Sorry.
it. Okay. All right. Well, we're gonna relocate here. I'm here at Starbucks, and they have decided that it is a bit too windy. As you can see, there is no wind, but apparently it is too windy, so they have to take down the umbrellas, which of course now is quite sunny. So since we're live, we're just gonna roll with it, and I'm just gonna relocate over here. Now, you can see she's on a mission back there, and she's taken down all the umbrellas. All right. So, where were we? All right. So, you want to work on the vision and then the mission. So once you've got the mission down, which are like, what are the key things that's driving us day to day, now with that, you're able to then launch into the strategic plan. So here are some tips around the strategic plan. The first thing I want to share with you guys is that the strategic plan should be compelling. It can't be something like, the office needs a fresh coat of paint, or we need to get some new chairs for the boardroom. That is not high-level planning, that's not high-level thinking, that sure isn't strategy. It's not the work that you as a board were called to do. So what I encourage you to do is to really think of a compelling plan. So something that gets you excited, even something maybe a little bit scary. That's when you know that you're onto something. So a compelling plan. Also, try to think about a time horizon of anywhere between 2, 3, and 5 years. So one of the challenges that a lot of boards face, or mistakes that they make, is they come up with a strategic plan that's only a 1-year plan. Which means, I mean, how lofty was your goal if it can be achieved in just 1 year or 1 term? And there's really no continuity. There's no long-term plan. There's really nothing for the new board to just kind of, pick up and run with and help you reach those long-term goals. So what I encourage you to do is to come up with maybe a 3 to 5 year plan. Something aspirational, something visionary, something compelling, something that's really going to involve not just your existing leadership, but perhaps the next one. So you start it, you lay the foundation, and then they can keep it going for years and years to come to realize that vision. So a 3 to 5 year plan is ideal. With that in mind, you also want to think about staying high level. Staying high level. We're talking 50,000 feet. So imagine an airplane. Strategy is 50,000 feet, way up here. Then, at the committee level, that's about 25,000 feet. It's kind of the work that's being done at the committee level. Still some strategy, but a lot of execution as well. You're about 25,000 feet. But then when you go down, ground level, that's more the staff level. That's 10,000 feet. So a teeny bit of strategy, but a whole lot of execution and a whole lot of implementation. So think about that, 50, 25, and 10. Today, at your strategic planning session, you guys are up at 50,000 feet. Please stay there. Don't worry about, well, how are we going to do this? Don't worry about how you're going to do that. This session's not about how, it's about the what and the why. So stay focused on that. Cool. And then finally, around the during the session, only come up with anywhere between 3 and 7 goals. 3 to 7 goals. Anything less than that, you really haven't pushed yourself and you're kind of wasting your 1 or 2 day planning session, right? Anything more than 7, I'm not sure it's manageable. You may not have the resources in terms of time, money, effort, staff, whatever, to actually see these things through, and then you might end up feeling overwhelmed, dejected, and quit. You don't want that. So I think if you just focus on 3 to 7 strategic goals that you can bring forward and work on for the next 3 to 5 years, wow, you've accomplished something. So that's what to do during the planning session. And finally, after the planning session, this is where a lot of groups struggle and fail, is they don't have an implementation plan. So part 1 is the strategic plan. Part 2 is the implementation plan. How are you actually going to get this done? Some call it deployment, some call execution. I'll call it implementation, right? So you've set the policy. Now you've got to implement the policy. So how do you do that? Here's how. The first thing you need to do is you need to make a decision. Who is going to do what by when? Who is going to do what by when? So here's something that I find useful, and this is what we did with Choix CIM this afternoon, is once we nail down those, and I think we came up with 6, which was perfect, 6 awesome, compelling goals, we then decided to assign a goal champion or a goal ambassador, someone that's responsible for taking that goal forward to the next step. So the next step is around exploring the feasibility. That doesn't happen at the planning session. That happens in terms of the implementation phase. So they're now tasked with the feasibility study. How does this work? What do we need to do? What resources are required, etc. So that happens afterwards. So each board member, as it turned out, was then tasked with being a champion of one of the goals that they hold most dear, that they could really, really commit to. So then after doing that, the next step is for each of those champions to then strike a task force. Now, a task force is kind of like a committee, but it's not a standing committee. It's a task force that has a specific task. The task is to review and make recommendations on a specific policy and then report their recommendations to the board for a decision as to what to do next. So that's the job of a task force. It's task-oriented, and it has a limited time horizon. Unlike normal standing committees like membership committee, finance committee, program committee, all of these committees are what we call standing committees that are always there. There's always something going on. These, though, task forces, are there for a specific need or a specific purpose or a specific project, and therefore have and should have a time horizon, a sunset clause. So in this case, what we did with this group here today was each of these task forces are struck today and will be ended in 4 months. And that was enough time that we felt that the board needed to do their due diligence and some further research on each of those strategic goals. 4 months because they meet bi-monthly, so they'll have 2 board meetings in which to report and speak and share and discuss before they report their findings. So be sure that you set up task forces, have a task force chair, and then finally come up with the terms of reference for each of those task forces. The final piece of advice that I would give you around setting up a task force or a committee is to set up a task force or committee comprised of members. One of the biggest mistakes that boards make is they feel like the directors have to do all the work themselves. Well, that's just a recipe for burnout. That doesn't work, and it's not sustainable. So if you want something sustainable with leverage, you need to get more people on your team. So what that means is your job as the chair is not to do all the work. Your job as chair is to recruit committee members or task force members. Engage them, get them involved, get them feeling empowered, and invite them to join your team and assist you in doing some of the hard work. So those were 3 tips on what to do, well, it was several tips, but on what to do before, during, and after a strategic planning session. Hope you guys found these tips really useful. If you have any questions at all about strategic planning or board governance, how to run effective board meetings, anything related to the not-for-profit sector, I'd be happy to answer your questions in the comments below, or just drop me a private message. Happy to chat with you. Tom Abbott here from AMC NPO Solutions, live in Merritt, BC. Until next time, see ya.